Ethics Board meeting for Baltimore City for Wednesday, June 12th, 2024, 2:30 p.m. It's 2:33 p.m. We'll call the meeting to order. All participants in the public session of the board meeting today acknowledge and consent to the video and audio recording of the public session and the publication of the recording on the board's website and social media accounts. We'll review our schedules today. Like to hope we can have a stop at 4 o'clock. Let's see what we can do. Anybody gotta get out of here earlier and quorum and important decision factors in scheduling?
No, I'm good.
None here.
All right, great. All right, it's a beautiful day out there, just as a reminder. So we'll do everything we can in a concise fashion. Per the Open Meetings Act, the board discloses that it adjourned its virtual open meeting on May 8th, 2024 to enter the administrative session at approximately 2:43 p.m. 3 board members were present. Member Newman was absent. Members discussed administrative matters, including complaints at that time. And likewise today, the board may need to close some or all of this meeting to preserve the confidentiality maintained or mandated by the Ethics Code or is otherwise authorized by the State Open Meetings Act. Upon adjournment of the open session, the board may reconvene for an administrative session to discuss non-public administrative functions of the board. But we'll move to the written minutes of May 8th. I had a chance to review them. Is there any comment or suggestions for edit?
John, how about it?
No, I have no comments or suggestions for edit.
All right, any discussion?
Second.
All right, hearing that, I move to approve. We'll take that preliminary second and go ahead and move this for a vote. All in favor of approving the May 8th written minutes of the public session signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. That they are approved, and we'll turn this over to our very hardworking staff.
Okay, we can also do, just because we have 3 guests here, we
Yep.
could have their business first, but would work for me, but that's the chair's decision.
That is definitely our collective position. Who is our first speaker today?
Well, let's go alphabetically. Let's go AFRAM Festival Charitable.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna. Good afternoon. Would you identify yourself? I do this on a phone and it's tiny. So if you would identify yourself, thank you.
Oh, good afternoon. My name is Nicole Green. I'm Deputy Director of Administration for Rec and Parks.
Of course, good to see you again.
You as well.
All right, tell us, this is an annual event, so we're no strangers to it. Tell us how you plan to operate and solicit donations.
So AFRAM has grown a lot in the last few years where a lot of people are interested. So we are looking to reach out to corporations and businesses to help support AFRAM. This one is really close to us because the 50th year of AFRAM is coming up in 2026. So we're looking to solicit even more donations to make that one be much larger than the others since it's such a milestone.
Right. All right, so you have a cap of $500,000 on the solicitations?
Yes.
And then you and your team will be the ones specifically soliciting contributions?
Yes, sir.
And the population you're going to be soliciting to, Ms. Green, includes
So
what?
we will be looking at corporations, mainly businesses, local and national businesses to help support AFRAM.
Okay.
Some of the people that we currently work with would be Coca-Cola, PNC, Bank of America. They've all sponsored AFRAM.
Okay.
Very well. And no changes, I mean, no material changes in any of your operations in prior
No,
years?
sir. No, sir.
Funds
No
will
changes.
continue to be handled through the Civic Fund?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Questions, members?
When an organization makes a donation, if I may, wait, when someone else starts to speak, I don't mean to cross talk anyone.
I was just saying, I don't have any questions.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Noel. When an organization makes a donation, are they then allowed to show their colors, so to speak? Can they advertise, et cetera? Will they get billing, some kind of, where
Yes.
their brand
yes.
is out there?
Correct. So depending on what level they sponsor us, we have their logo on the stage, on all of our banners, on our social media pages. Some we have a sponsor who has sponsored T-shirts, so their logos go on our T-shirts. They get recognition from the mayor. They get tickets to the VIP event that the mayor has. So yes, there are a lot of different things that they get. They're allowed to have a space along the footprint where they can put a tent, a table, to give out information. If they have things that they want to give away. Some people have even given us stuff to put in our swag bags. So it really varies. We try to tailor it to each company that donates to us.
Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any discussion regarding this gift solicitation waiver request?
I'd like to be, I'm curious as to what will go into the grab bags, and wondered if 5 of those, 7 of those could be directed to the Board of Ethics for inspection.
I don't know what's in our
I
grab
said
bags
that.
this year.
I'm sorry, I
but
said that. I'm sorry, I
No,
said that.
no.
So embarrassing. That
In
was
the last year, we had like some stuff from the Baltimore Peninsula. There were little cutlery sets that we gave away. We got we had some hats and some Afram branded fanny packs. So there are always different things. It just varies from year to year.
Right, that's what I was saying. I wondered under federal law if we should inspect to see what it was to make sure that it was appropriate. We wouldn't want little sharp knife to injure little children or anything. But I would retract my inquiry. Please forgive. Sorry.
All right. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
All right, we appreciate it. Are we prepared to vote? Is there a motion to approve this request?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, and duly seconded. All in favor of approval of the Afram Festival GSW? Go ahead and signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. That's approved. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
You
You
too.
too. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Mr. President.
I like GSW. It's way easier than gift solicitation waiver. I don't know why that. I always have a problem with that. The 2 words together. All right.
You know what GSW stands for, right?
Yeah, I'm sure in Romeo Tango language it does. What does it stand for?
Golf Sierra Whiskey is a gunshot wound.
Oh, I knew you'd have one for us.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
Gift solicitation waiver then, after all. So,
Mhm.
all right. Let's move on to the City Council President transition solicitation waiver application. We have Chief Master here.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
How are you?
Happy Wednesday. Oh, I'm great. Thank you. And even better because tomorrow I'm attempting to go on vacation. So very, very much looking forward to that. But grateful to all of you. And thanks for always making time for us. This one is a little bit different than kind of other solicitation waivers we've done in the past, and a little bit uncharted territory for us. But it is to create a transition, a fund for transition committee or related expenses. After speaking with the comptroller's office, they gave us some helpful insights related to some kind of ancillary costs that were associated with their transition and a thoughtful transition, which included, engaging some additional staff resource to help with kind of herding the cats around a transition committee, as well as helping to produce an eventual public report that would share the findings of that committee, the committee's findings. I think in addition, the council member is very interested in potentially doing some site visits to observe some best practices. I think the nice thing about having such a long period of transition is that it does give us more opportunity and kind of runway to be really thoughtful about what can be true in a transition. And so he would really like to make sure that we are having those conversations and having the opportunity to go and see those best practices if necessary, and also convene transition groups, and often you have to feed those people and the like. So that would be the bulk of it. There may be, I truthfully don't have a great sense of the costs related to an inauguration, and whether or not those, to what extent. I think he would prefer that there are no taxpayer funds related to that cost. And so there would likely be some fundraising to that end as well. But a little bit, we're building this plane while we fly it. So admittedly, there's a bit that I don't yet know. But
Yeah.
first stop was to come to you guys.
Well, we're glad you did, obviously. And you know, I probably just need some edification on the history of this, because I guess I've been on the board the longest. I don't know, 8 years, something like that. And I don't remember ever getting one of these. I do remember, I am aware that there's an inaugural fund, and I would imagine there's got to be some money in the actual budget for transition, isn't there? I mean, I'm just curious, and this might be a case of first impression for us. So
Yeah. So our understanding, and I have not actually probed on the inauguration front, so I can't answer that one. Although I can tell you, as just a default, I think Zeke's preference is to not use taxpayer dollars for something like that, if possible. When it comes to the transition and transition funding, there's actually not, there's no government funding available to our knowledge to support that. There may be at the mayoral level, there is not at the council president level.
okay, gotcha. Yep. All right.
And the comptroller may have, if they didn't do an ethics waiver, that may also have been because I think they work directly with a foundation. And I think my relative understanding is that you might not need to do that if it's a foundation, if it's a direct ask from a foundation. But I think two things. One is that in the event that there are particularly related to the inauguration costs, if there are individual donors that we wanted to solicit, and just because I think even when we're going through a foundation, Zeke's comfort level is to first kind of come and get an ethics waiver.
Right.
So that's
Okay, thank you. Let's talk. Let's get some questions and answers now.
I have a question. Ms. Master, do you know whether the previous city council president or the sitting city council president had a similar transition solicitation?
To my knowledge, no. I can't speak to whether or not they solicited funds, but I don't believe there was a solicitation waiver. And I don't have an answer to kind of the extent of their process with that.
Okay. I'm saying that to say, I asked that because I was slightly familiar with the transition committee for the immediate past comptroller, which happened 25 years ago. Well, more a few more years, but she was in office 25 years. And I don't think there was any funding for that. It was it was all volunteer effort. A concern that I'm having, I'm going to just be delicately but diplomatically transparent, is I'd hate for some entity to feel like the brand new city council president was bought and paid for because some entity made a generous donation to the transition effort and felt that City Council President Cohen owed them something.
Sure.
Hate to have that impression. And
Mhm.
because I saw him on TV just last night with someone standing behind him saying, Baltimore City cannot be bought.
Right.
Something
Yeah.
like that, right?
I
So-
think that's a really valid concern. And I think that the very reason that we go through the ethics waiver process is to be able to disclose all of those donors and to, kind of in the light of day, to, be accountable to and to be up, to go under scrutiny, and to, ultimately be able to say, these are the individuals, or these are the foundations, or these are the, the entities, because I think they could just continue to donate to his political campaign, and call it a donation. And I think instead, what we want to be really clear about is that if we are using any funds for the transition, we want to be very clear what they're going toward and who is being solicited and from whom are we receiving funds.
So one buffer that the public would have against the appearance of favoritism or the C word is that your intention is to publicize the list of donors for the transition effort?
No, I think just disclosing it to you all in subsequent reports.
So remember that our quarterly reports are due from any agency or any office that has requested and was granted a waiver. So these documents are filed every 3 months, and they disclose the individual donors, and they are posted publicly on the Ethics Board's website right next to the solicitation waiver.
Thank you for that insight, Chris. But again, we're going through a really sensitive time in terms of appearances. And I'm not trying to hug the mic out, everybody. Please, I assure you, I'll shut up in a second. But I just hate for it to look like, here we go again. That someone that some entity has with plenty of money has stepped up and been shown made some generous gesture, and later on is up for something from the city, and at the board of estimates, they get favorable treatment, particularly if the Board of Estimates shrinks down to what is being petitioned for. Man, it would look like, you got enough money, you can get anything you want from Baltimore. Hate to have that impression. That's what we're here to prevent from occurring. And again, I'm shutting up so that my colleagues can weigh in on this, or the staff.
They got their hand raised. If not, I'll just jump in really quick. Did you have it? I'm sorry. I'm kind of blind.
I do, and
Go
it's
right
more of curiosity. I know in the application, hi Maggie, how are you?
Hi. Good. Thanks,
Congrats
Mel.
on vacation.
Yes, thank
Coming up. But I noticed in the application, Councilman Cohen indicated that he would target individuals with a history of supporting civic engagement and democracy. I believe at the top it says something similar. Where do you think, or historically, where has that information come from, and how will you go about getting a list like that? I'm just curious to make sure that it's not controlled donors, right?
Yep. So I think number one, I think Chris has provided us in the past with a list of controlled donors. And if
Okay.
Chris, excuse me, if it wasn't you,
There
was
is a list of entities doing business with the
Yeah.
city that's provided by the Controller's Office every year. That's also on the website.
yes.
Okay.
So so I think number one is reviewing that. The second thing I will say is that by and large, kind of our first course generally is to talk to local. We have a pretty large philanthropic base in the city. And so we have I think, try and have a pretty good sense of kind of which foundations care about kind of what, I would say what their kind of key issues are. Is it education? Is it kids? Is it, transparency and accountability, et cetera. And so typically that is kind of the first, our first step is kind of going to those larger and local philanthropic spaces to ask and less so going to individual donors. And we sort of, I kind of like to put catch-all language in these just because we don't know yet what we don't know. But I will say that with something like the splash pad last year, that was very much a kind of all hands on deck. People that we wanted to think about not highly individualized, but targeting more likely to target individual donors. For instance, partnering with the Friends of Patterson Park and with the local neighborhood association to be able to contact individuals that were related to those entities, knowing that they had a vested interest in the space at Patterson Park. When it comes to something like this, our plan at this moment is really to target a couple key local foundations and philanthropic groups.
Okay, great. Because I'm glad you brought up the splash pad.
All right.
That was.
Sorry,
Can someone? Okay.
that was
The
me.
splash. Oh, okay.
I'm
The
on
splash
delay.
pad is. Okay, no worries. The splash pad is a great example of where, when asking for a waiver and soliciting, it's the organization has the same type of mission as the event, right?
Mhm.
Splash pad children, and I'm sure the donors wanted to see children have a great time for the summer. How do we make sure and ensure that the individuals who we solicit, non-controlled donors, such as organizations that may have missions of whatever their mission is, they wouldn't think that a donation would mean something in turn, because an inauguration is a great event to honor the transition, but it's an event for the person being honored, right?
Sure.
And outside of the mission of a nonprofit. So will there be any catch-all language saying that this is solely for the inauguration and the transition of leadership, and nothing is to be expected in return, or anything like that? Or would that be
I
something you'll
would,
consider?
yeah, I mean, I think there is always language that gets at that information. And I should say that, I don't know whether or not when it comes to the inauguration, and truthfully, this is just my own kind of that is sort of so far off, and also kind of, to me, the least important part of the transition process. And so I have not delved into it, admittedly, as much as I should, in terms of just better understanding even kind of what, if any, funding comes from the city. But whether or not it would be more appropriate to ask to speak to individuals, or whether or not actually it even is, with something like a inauguration, if it is not actually appropriate for the confines of the transition fund. And I would leave that more to kind of get the input from this group. Kind of my goal when sort of thinking about crafting this solicitation waiver was just sort of creating as wide of a berth as possible, because we just sort of don't know what the landscape is going to look like as we think through the next 6 months of a transition, in terms of whether or not we find that there is or isn't funding for inauguration, or whether or not Zeke feels comfortable using that funding from taxpayers. And so I did include it, but not a great answer, Noelle, other than to say, definitely, I think when we think about sort of the transition committee efforts and any best practice visits, things like that, what we're immediately thinking about are some of the organizations that are really focused on ensuring accountability, efficacy, transparency, and government. When it comes to the inauguration, I don't yet sort of have an answer. And so if it makes sense for us to split that off and come back with a second one, we could also do that. I'll look to you all for some advice on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
John,
yes,
go ahead.
thank you, Ms. Master, for coming and presenting to us. I had a couple of follow-up questions. I don't really understand what inauguration means. I mean, I know that somebody takes an oath of office and that's their inauguration, but it sounds like you're talking about sort of the festivities and events surrounding inauguration. And
Yeah, I think it is both of those two things. I think it is both whatever ceremony is involved, and then typically I think there is some kind of after festivities.
yeah, so I guess I'm gonna confess I don't quite understand the whole process well enough, but it sounds like these festivities would be funded by donors who would contribute to the civic fund, who would in turn disperse the funds. But my understanding is that donations to the civic fund are considered tax deductible. And it strikes me as a little weird that, weird's not a good word, but a little unusual that donors would donate to the civic fund and get a tax donation that can be spent on essentially a celebration of the city councilman's success in getting the seat. And that doesn't seem to be a government function. It seems to be I'm not begrudging anyone's celebration. I just find it a little unusual that there would be sort of money going into a fund that's a tax deductible fund and then dispersed for essentially festivities surrounding an inauguration. So that's my first concern and question. The second question is, there's going to be some kind of a contractor who's helping you put together a transition staff. I presume you haven't chosen that contractor yet, or are you planning to put bids out for that?
So I do not know if we'll actually even go that route, in part because in the interim between kind of having the initial conversations with the comptroller's office about kind of the way they handled their process, there was kind of mixed reviews on whether having an outside entity kind of help was actually the best use of time and resources. So what I can tell you is we don't have a contractor. I don't know that we are going to have a contractor. I think we wanted to just allow for the flexibility as we in real time kind of make that decision. And I do also want to, I think, just in response to another question that may have been raised, anybody on the who would serve on a transition committee, it would obviously be a volunteer. They would not be paid. The only what was recommended to us from a existing staff capacity and just understanding that it is not an insignificant amount of hours that is involved in the next 6 months setting up a transition, is that from an existing staff capacity, it was helpful to be able to hire someone who could take on some of that work, whether it was the research requested by the transition committee or helping to craft the actual transition report. So I think all to say, we're not certain that we would hire a consultant. Certainly there's no one in mind for that at this point. And I don't have an answer about a bid because I think it would be, I think I'd need to better understand what the bid process looks like for a relatively low cost kind of contractual service like that.
Okay, and the other question I had was, would any of the donors have any input on if there were an outside contractor selected to help put together a transition committee? Would they have input on the selection process? Or would they have input on who's going on that transition committee, sort of having a seat at the table of the transition? That's another question I have about this.
Based on how we are currently proceeding, that is not that is not how the situation would unfold. We, we see this as potentially having an individual that, say, we know is great at research, who can just do some research for us. As if the committee, if one of the sub working groups says, we would like to better understand what the process is for execution of constituent services across districts at scale in 3 municipalities with practices, we would like to be able to, pay somebody to say, go sort of research all of that and then bring us back that information. This is not someone who would be in any way crafting the working groups. That's going to happen kind of internal to our team.
So that's my question. So the working group or the transition committee will be internal to the office of Z. Cohen, or will it be
Yes.
outsiders?
I think there will also be volunteer advisors.
And that's what I'm getting at. Are any of those outside advisors, the selection of I imagine it's an honor to be on such a committee, even though it's a volunteer process, but it is, if you're someone who wants to influence city policy, it would be a nice thing to be able to get on one of those transition committees and steer it in a direction. So what I'm wondering is whether any of these donors are going to have input onto any outsiders coming onto that committee, or otherwise maybe being on the committee themselves by virtue of having made these donations.
Yeah. I can tell you, just based on the order of operations and the timeline as we see it, is that the working groups we are trying to identify them in real time right now based on the areas of, the priority areas that Zeke sees as the areas that he most wants to kind of really dig into and kind of look at best practices around. And that is happening kind of that is happening kind of now in real time. And we have not begun doing any soliciting yet to raise any money for this. So in terms of the cart and the horse, shall we say, the working groups will already be identified prior to any funding raised.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your response on that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I've just got a couple of thoughts. You had mentioned it earlier. Look, in a perfect world, I would actually feel more comfortable if this were 2 requests, because quite frankly, transition work benefits Baltimore. It makes the office better. It makes government better. And a lot of us have always thought that inaugural is a big party, and sometimes a big party where maxed out donors can go ahead and make unlimited contributions and still get a little bit of recognition for it. There's so many questions I have here, because we have a presidential federal inaugural committee that has, I just Googled when John was speaking, and the only prohibition I see there is foreign nationals can't donate, but anybody else can, any amount. And then I see, and I pulled up an article from Maryland Matters from about a year ago that said, that this was only the second time that the gubernatorial inaugural committee had to report publicly. And of course, the second paragraph of the article said donors included scores of prominent Maryland businesses and just as many from out of state real estate and construction firms, energy companies and utilities, healthcare entities, financial firms, lawyers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think I love the transition, as novel as it is. I love the idea of a transition request here. The bottom line is there's a lot of things that people don't love or that don't look great, but they're legal. And so they're law, and that's what we do. Um, what I really want to know, and I may want to lean on Chris for this or something, is what laws, if any, what we have for the mayor's inaugural committee, and what is there any analog for this? So that's, if you want to just respond to that. Yeah, I'm done. I love the idea. Don't love inaugural committee funds so much, but so long as they've been vetted by law, that is not our judgment to substitute the judgment of the law. So
I'm happy to do research on that. Thanks.
yeah, I mean,
Just as a footnote, just having just 1 year ago, not quite a year and 5 months ago, there was a quasi-agency not under the board's jurisdiction who actually sabotaged the transition from one elected official to another by not letting the newly elected official on the premises of the previous elected officials agency. So I was very positively impressed by Councilman Cohen's and the sitting council president's effort to make this a smooth transition, apart from whatever funds may be involved that may or may not be raised. So that's just as a footnote of appreciation on that.
so any other discussion with the members?
I have a discussion. No
Okay,
comment.
okay.
During my limited tenure on the Board of Ethics, Councilman Cohen's presentations have been just superb. The staffers who've come to make them have been articulate and, in fact, eloquent, and like yourself, Ms. Master. I just am curious as to, I don't, and I will understand if you have no immediate reaction to this, but I wonder what reaction it might be from Councilman Cohen, maybe soon to be City Council Vice President Cohen, and my colleagues about publicizing outside of the Board of Ethics website, which the public probably rarely visits, the donors for the fundraising that you are proposing. I say that in part because in the past it's been the light shown on individuals that has awakened question in the public of, whether something was appropriate that was being asked for or being decided upon. Sometimes it stopped that thing, sometimes it didn't. But bottom line is we want to try to have the public feel like Baltimore is a good place to live in, and that the city government of Baltimore runs based on merit. It's a meritocracy rather than based on financial generosity.
Got it. And I appreciate your words, Arnold. And I think, one wondering or challenge, I guess I have is, is there, if we publicize that information, does it actually in some way potentially inadvertently send a message to people who didn't donate to say, these are the folks that donated, which,
Right.
there's a part of me that appreciates the fact that you all know, and, you are sort of the keepers of the information, such that if something created a concern, you can raise it up the flag, but that we're not saying, hey, everybody, here's the list of people that have donated, just in case anybody else wanted to donate. So I think that's my initial sort of reaction, but I leave it to you all to kind of figure out the best. We're happy to publicize something or not publicize something. and I think the other thing that I'm sort of realizing that I think Noelle really helped clarify for me, and honestly, a little bit, this is kind of, I will admit that, like, on my end, kind of the scrambling of like, okay, we want to make sure that we are, that this is, we know we're going to need to do some things. We want to make sure that it's in bounds. We want to be able to talk to the ethics board. So kind of here's the full expanse. But actually, this conversation really clarified for me, and I think Noelle, in part, kind of your question about who would be solicited, is that these really are two separate things that I think it would be really helpful. And I don't know, you tell me the next step, but just in real time, I think this conversation says to me, these two things, whether or not an inauguration is an acceptable thing to even get a solicitation waiver for, it feels increasingly through this conversation separate and apart from the other things that we want to do related to the transition, and would probably be a different group that we would likely solicit to for that reason. And so would also just ask, let me know sort of, I've not been in a process before where in real time I've said, hey, what does it look like to amend this? But, curious if that makes sense to others as well.
Yeah, well, we'll discuss that, but Noelle, you have been very patient. Go right ahead.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Noelle.
When I do that, I hate when I do that. But in reference to the charge, Maggie, that you're asking of us, I thought to me, just to piggyback off of what Steve was saying, is separated, but with a great point in your application about, for example, visiting sites, cities, and so forth. I can think of organizations, I know Chris can think of them too, that want to educate city leaders about ways to be able to offer efficiency, and such as open society, right? But that would be something that would be separate, and you could really itemize and say, look, these site visits are to see best practices and so forth, is completely separate and apart from an inauguration, right? And then it would be really easy to parse out. And because of course, we love to see the city work, and we want to defend it because it's our decisions, right? And so that would be a perfect way to be able to articulate why this should go forward when you itemize it a little bit more, because everything in the application makes sense for the transition. But some things we could definitely see how nonprofits can be on board and can benefit outside of receiving or expecting anything. Right? Just educating will be their gift.
I agree.
Well said. All right. How do we want to leave this? Arnold,
Sorry. I'm sorry. I have one more comment. May I just?
Yep.
May I? That's just this. The term controlled donor for me is ethics speak. It's not citizen speak. And so when the common citizen doesn't know what a controlled donor is, as far as I know, and so they only know if someone donates something or some entity donates something or doesn't. And if that same someone later or entity later comes before the Board of Ethics asking for something, approval for something, or gets approved for something that seems generous, then that's when the eyebrows go up, or letters are written or phone calls are made, and only then. So I'm just saying that to say, publicizing some things makes people, has the possibility of making the public feel like things are being done in the open and transparent, as opposed to them being sub rosa. I'll say no more. Yes, I sound like a broken record. I'm just trying to fulfill my role on the board here as a.
I appreciate it, and I agree with you. And I think that it's, in my experience, transparency is almost always better, and sharing that is almost always better. You know, and I look to you all for sort of advice on how to make sure we're doing that in a way that doesn't feel like we are in some way advertising who has, you know, who has signed on to help figure out that process, for instance. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Maggie. All right, I mean, I think the board's ready to discuss this matter. I mean, we've asked questions and we've made statements of opinion. I think the
Great.
board's ready to go into discussion on this. So thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome to, yeah, you're
Thank
welcome to
you.
stick around.
Yeah, great. And just let me know in terms of what the what next steps would be. But I think that at a minimum, what I would like to submit is, you know, is some modification to the waiver to kind of separate out for now, I think, to remove the inauguration, and then maybe further conversation about whether or not it's appropriate to submit a separate one, or whether or not that's actually just a not something that we should be submitting for in the first place.
Yeah, and you're welcome to stick around here. I mean, this is open. This is an open meeting. So, I mean, I want to kick off our discussion by saying that the inauguration's not till December, but the transition starts yesterday. So, I would not have a problem, as long as it is on the record here in our public meeting, that if there was intent to amend this application to cover the transitional aspects of the office, I would have no problem with that. The other thing, and I don't want to be the fly in the ointment, the other thing is that we all know who will win the November general election based on history. But technically, the transition is for a candidate elect rather than a nominee. So I make no bones about, what political party I've supported in but that may be a legal issue. But on the other hand, I mean, that's the other thing, the legislature, when do they get sworn in January, and the president gets sworn in January. And even then, that's not much time to have an inaugural committee together. But for a November election, and then you have a couple of weeks to transition after you take a week off, so you can probably, relax after what what everybody's been through in an election year. So that could be an issue. But I would be certainly receptive to a transitional committee waiver solicitation, subject to what I just said. I don't want to be the fly in the ointment here, but and that's why I'd love Chris to look into this, because he doesn't have to do, of course he does, but I swear this volunteer gig raises so many law school exam questions every time I'm here. So on issues which many of us are not familiar with, like election law or other areas of that. But I'm really glad that you're here. I really think we ought to get a little more research, and maybe we can talk with you and your office about maybe crafting it, bifurcating it, whatever the word is. How does the board feel about that?
Great.
Yeah, my feeling, Steve, is that's a good idea. We ought to see if anything has been done like this before. What the board's position has been. What's the precedent? I would favor some kind of a bifurcation or severance of the inaugural piece from the transition piece. The transition piece feels a lot more appropriate, at least to me, in terms of a solicitation waiver. The inaugural thing seems a little bit more like a political donation, but I'm feeling as you that we should get a little more information, and I am leaning toward I'm leaning toward being favorable to the transition piece.
All right. I'll make a motion that we employ Christoph Amberger to provide us with law and best practices regarding this request.
Very
Thank you,
good.
Chris.
All
I
right.
Feel
second
that
the
we're in good
motion.
hands.
All right. All in favor, we'll go ahead and ask Mr. Amberger. Thank you. So ordered. And motion approved. Thank you for being here. That's why, yours
Oh,
are
no,
always
thank
so.
you all. And yeah,
Thank you.
truly, thank you for the great, I think, vigorous debate and discussion. It definitely, I think, clarified some things for me, which was very helpful. So I really appreciate you all and the public service that you serve through this process. It is very needed and important. So thank you all so much.
Thank
Have a great rest
so
of
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You take
Have a
care.
great-
Enjoy vacation.
Definitely.
Yes.
Right. Thank you, guys. Yeah, that's an interesting one, but never a dull moment here. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being patient. We're on to our third request for the new business today, and that is Rec and Parks. And would you identify yourself, please? I can
Yes, my
barely
name
see.
is, okay. My name is Anne Green. I work at the Rawlings Conservatory, which is part of the Horticulture Division of Recreation and Parks.
Thank you for being here. Tell us about the conservatory funding request.
So we've had a BCF account since 2011. Most of the fundraising that we do via that account is passive. We have a button on our website that donors can go to. We typically don't have large donations. Last time we had a large donation was before my time in this position. It's mostly individuals rather than companies or businesses. And we use it to sort of bridge any shortfalls in our budget and funding. Right around 2011, even though that was before my time, there was a conversation with Rec and Parks Administration that made it clear that we are expected to be, at least in part, in a significant part, revenue-based. So this is sort of one of the angles that we tackle to
Right.
get more funds into our facility.
Right. I mean, rather than doubling the cost of the pool overnight or anything like that. I mean, you've got
Well,
to,
we're just the conservatory.
oh, that's right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So Park and Recs. Yeah. Yeah. What a great cause. And obviously not much has changed here. The button, it's the same
Mhm.
button, right?
Yes.
And any questions? Thank you. Any questions from the members?
No, sir. So am I
All right.
good?
Yeah, I think we are.
Okay.
It's pretty quiet over here, unless the Wi-Fi died. So I'll make a motion that we approve the HP Rawlings Conservatory government gift solicitation waiver application.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Thank you
Okay,
so
thank you
much.
all.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for
being.
being.
Take care.
All right. Thank you. We're moving along to our staff update at this time.
Yes. So we had a busy month. On May 29th, I was invited to attend the board meeting of the OIG Advisory Board and had the opportunity to answer a few pertinent questions regarding the Ethics Department's budget, with this particular focus on the yet to be programmed new financial disclosure system. This was in preparation of a budget hearing on May 30th in front of the City Council, where I was invited to accompany the Inspector General. And coincidentally, the main interest was also on the development of the new financial disclosure system, which, if you recall, last year the OIG made a request for an enhancement. BCIT stepped in and said they would probably be able to absorb the cost of development. The system itself has not been started yet. One of the vendors that we were working with dropped out halfway through the vetting process. We have now completed various pre-purchase analyses and vendor presentations, and I think we are ready to pick a vendor on July 1st. At least that is what the selected date for this is. We have communicated to all applying vendors that the system really has to be in place and flawless before the new round of disclosures, which starts, of course, on January 1st. And in addition, the Council President-elect requested that ethics provide hopefully in-person instruction to the new class of council persons who will be stepping up in the new year. And of course, we are always willing to do so and provide the best instruction there to avoid problems from the get-go. In fact, I already met with one councilman-elect who wanted to get a head start on this. And so last Wednesday, I sat with him for an hour and went through the common problems and pitfalls that are inherent in the ethics law. Staffing, we are interviewing for candidates for Morris replacement. I am ready to pick a particular candidate probably next week. We executed our post 30-day delinquency email for about 300 city employees, which stirred a bit of a hornet's nest because, as per law, it has to the notice has to contain the reference that it will be referred to the Inspector General, and that always gets a reaction. To date, we have 3,030 disclosures collected, up from 2,878 last fiscal year. The increase is probably mostly due to a more generous and diligent inclusion of employees by the agency heads who provide us with the names and email addresses, and who by now probably or hopefully understand better that it is not really the job description that defines the eligibility to file, but it is the letter of the law. That in turn has caused some indignation by officials who had never had to file before or don't understand that they have to file for the preceding calendar year, no matter if a promotion placed them in the qualifying category in this calendar year. So that is it in brief for staff notes. And I think the remaining notes that I have are probably best served in the administrative part.
Sure. All right. What do we have now? So we don't have any old business in the public session. We've concluded our new business. Go ahead, Arnold.
Have we publicized any of our stats any place other than our website?
No, but we're also approaching the end of our fiscal year. So in 3 weeks, we're looking at June 30th, and we will be publicizing that at that point. I'm happy to include that on the Instagram site, and of course on the Inspector General's website. I think the numbers in themselves probably are not, require more context to be appreciated than typically can be transmitted to the general public. But I'm not sure if it is newsworthy that the ethics staff has processed X number of financial disclosures that we're required to process by law, collect by law. I think that outside of this, so just that is just my feeling for it. I know that our feelings on this may diverge.
Well, I mean, I think that you have an incredible compass and a barometer. But I would also think that that the news outlets have the ability to decide what to publicize and what not, what they should accept as a press release, or that they publish, or that they reject. I mean, we keep talking to ourselves, and the public does not necessarily know that we're actively trying to fulfill to carry out our role under the law. Obviously, this is not about, I think you must know, this is not about self-aggrandizement. It's not going to get any of us a raise, but still, the public needs to know that somebody's looking. And it could be that I'm showing my age. I'm probably about the oldest one on here. Maybe Hyman Pressman, the image of him still resonates in my brain, but he considered himself the watchdog, I think it was, for the public as comptroller, and no one has really replaced him as far as I can tell. But we are doing that role now, part of that role, by watching what's going on. But the public doesn't know that somebody is doing it broadly. A few people, sophisticated people, know. Then I think something may be lost. So I've asked this before. I'm doing it altruistically. I have no ulterior motives. I'm not asking that the names of the board members be publicized. However, if the board somehow gets a slightly higher public profile, maybe we get that fifth board member appointed, maybe, because people might say, it's just a 5-person board. Why is there a vacancy? They're doing their job. Maybe. I'd love to have my colleagues weigh in on this. I mean, if you don't agree, I don't mind, but I'd rather you weigh in rather than be silent.
Yeah, I'd rather be silent. I think there are other ways to discuss marketing plan ethics board than in a public session. It's not germane for the public to understand what we're going to do to publicize our actions. I think we just make decisions and publicize our actions. And we have a private, we have a confidential administrative agenda to go to today. So, I think we have other work to consider today. And that's
Okay.
my thought on it.
That's fine. Well, I'm going to go back to one other thing then, Mr. Chairman, and that is, I asked a question about making transparency regarding the request for Councilman Cohen's fundraising situation, publicizing donors, and it may have been preposterous. It may have gotten no support from my colleagues, but I'd like to hear you say that publicly.
Well,
Yeah,
let me
I don't know what's
can I
going
respond
on.
to that.
Yeah,
I thought,
come on, John.
I didn't think it was a preposterous suggestion at all, but I did think that Maggie's response to that publicizing a list like that may suggest to people who are not on the list that they better get on it. I thought that was a fairly thoughtful response.
Yeah.
I also feel comfortable that this list of donors is publicized on the website and available to news organizations if they think it's a newsworthy thing to report on, and not something that's hidden. So I'm not sure that I can really balance all of the interests, but I come down on it's being publicized on the website. It's available for those who are interested in finding it, and including news organizations, which they're entitled to look at it if they think it's newsworthy. And I'm a little concerned about what Maggie said about the optics of publishing a list and letting people know that they're not on it.
And I think that it was a valid, I mean, very thoughtful, as you said. I like the way you characterized it, response that she made. But I also think that we have the ability to have that office say, we're not doing this to pressure, not, and he wouldn't use this rudimentary kind of comment. We're not doing this to pressure others. We're doing this for full transparency about who was supportive, who donated to this effort. So I think that could be put out there to the world, so the world knows. You know, doing this work for the public, and then having the public not know some of the things that are going on because they don't know to find their way to the ethics board's website, seems to me to be somewhat limited. What say you, Noel? And Steve?
No, Arnold, we have already voted to hear from Chris to provide legal advice to us and get back to us. And we closed discussion on this issue 20-30 minutes ago. So I would suggest that we are going to re-engage in this discussion, but we've already voted to get some more information and sit back down again and talk about it again. So I think that time is.
I would just say this one other thing. Allow me to just say one other thing, and that is, I did raise my hand to speak, and I thought we voted on whether there would be we would be deciding whether an inauguration should be separate from the transition. I did not think that the investigation, that the research Chris was doing would include the matter of making the donation process more transparent. I apologize if I missed that. I just didn't see that, Steve, just so you know.
Okay, all right. At this point, if I don't hear any objection, we're going to go ahead and we're going to adjourn the public session. Hearing no objection, we are adjourning the public session. Thank you for joining us.